Mr. Wisby, you're back, man.
I'm
So,
back for round two. This is going to be a fun time.
yeah. Yeah, I know we had some troubles yesterday, so anyway, man. Yeah, you've been telling me about you're not really doing a whole much lately, just spend time with the family and on
Yep.
some family nights.
There's only so much you can do with all this rules going on. So
Hmm.
I like to just spend time with the family, same old routine, clean up around the house, try some new recipes, go for a drive, and enjoy the podcast, enjoy YouTube, play a couple games, keep out of trouble. Sometimes trouble is good, though.
Absolutely, man. So I know we were kind of wanting to discuss history and all that stuff. I had so much stuff on my mind. Like even yesterday, I had there was a lot of things that I was forgetting about. So it's good that we're kind of doing this today. So and I'm more awake, so that's
Hey,
always
good,
good.
good, good.
Um, yeah. So I guess kind of going back, we were kind of talking about like hygiene and stuff like that back in the 17th century. You gotta wonder, man, like, in the movies, like, they make people look, Hollywood makes everything look so glamorous. Like, people really look like that back then. Like, you gotta wonder. And I guess one thing I really learned, because one of the videos I watched, it was about like hygiene back in the 17th century, 18th century, and, or 1800s anyway. And they were talking about how like even the rich they even like they didn't have the best hygiene, like the most, like they didn't really introduce soap until I think it was the 1800, like late 1800s, early 1900s. And even at that, like you didn't have like Irish Spring, and you didn't have like all that stuff that really smells good, right? Like, but the thing is, and you gotta wonder too, like yeah, as much as they didn't have all these products that we have today, if you look at it, like, uh, they didn't have the medical, they didn't have as much of the medical ideas or practices that we have today. However, people, I think, honestly, and they were talking about this even in the medieval century, um, people actually ate probably better back then than they did now, because you didn't have all the added alternative, you didn't have all these added things put in your food. So people really, I mean, even if you didn't eat a whole lot back then, if you're poor, at least you were still eating pretty damn good. So I guess how you look at it is, okay, they didn't have the medical practices to keep people living until 80, 90 years old, and if you did pretty good. However, at least at least back then, you had a better chance because you ate better. Mostly any kind of work that you did, you had to walk, you had to always stay active. So I guess, in a sense, were people really healthier back then, or are people healthier now? Because at least now we have medical things to help people, but everything we consume, most people, we're all consuming added chemicals. And so what's your thoughts about that?
I like where you're going with that. And in my case, I feel it's a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
Today's society is such a rush society, or we
Yep.
try and go do too many things at once and go too fast. So we need that quick food. We need that takeout. We want our snacks. We want different foods, different diets. I like alternative foods or meal replacement bars. None of that was available even 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about the 1800s, even their food was different, like you said. So you ate more meat and potatoes or fish, vegetables that you could grow in your garden or somebody else's garden. You kind of knew what was going into that. The dirt, the rainwater, maybe water from the river or lake area, where whatever you're near. And today, what do? We buy food at a grocery store from a different country that could be packaged or put chemicals on. I eat a lot of apples, and certain apples in today come with wax on them. So either you have
That's
to take
true.
the skin off, you have to wash off the wax, or cut it off with a knife. Now, how old is that apple? That could be a 3 or 4 month old apple, and the consumer doesn't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you know what's really crazy, and you're talking about apples here. You gotta look at this video, and I thought it was all bullshit. But you know how Facebook has like that fact, like they'll have like the fact checked or whatever. So apparently this woman was taking salt water and vinegar, something like that, salt water and vinegar, something like that, and water, in warm water, and she's throwing strawberries in, and apparently some strawberries can have actually bugs in them, and it really opened my mind, like, oh my god, after all the strawberries, I really hope that there was nothing in them, and it's just crazy. And I thought, like I said, I thought it was BS, and I look underneath, and the fact check said yes, yeah, no, that can happen. And I'm like, oh geez. So it really opens up your eyes about how our world is today with the food distribution and how things are made back then. Like I'm not saying that back then, like strawberries had bugs in them, and I mean you're growing things outside, things happen. Um, but I mean, like I said, going back to the old days. I mean, people, like I said, they ate very well, and I guess you kind of, yeah, like you said, it's a double-edged sword. Like people ate very well back then, but when you got to the age where natural things happen in your body, like, and it could be simple, it could be very simple as just heart issues. Like you get to that age where it might run your family, you have heart issues, and back then they couldn't do a triple bypass. So I mean, you had heart issues, you were pretty much fucked. So
I like that you talked about that video with the strawberries. I seen that too.
you
So you're
did,
worried
okay.
about eating a bug here and there. I like the theory. Somebody told me that well, when you're sleeping once a year, you could swallow a spider. You know that I understand that's gross, but you don't know. I've heard of that before.
As long
Um,
as you don't know about it, I mean,
right? You know
don't.
that's okay. But getting back to that, I do believe it's all about food processing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in today's age, in a age where we need food quick, everything is in boxes or packages, and these food scientists or these people on fads or diets say we shouldn't buy food that's packaged. You should buy all natural food other than meat because meat has to be packaged or certain other products have to be packaged. But stay away from the heavily packaged or over processed foods, and you're almost better off. If you read an ingredient list on the foods today and you can't read something, and we're the age we are, high educated, and we can't pronounce something, why are we eating it?
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. That is
You know,
definitely true.
again,
Um,
with the diseases, like you said back in the day, I totally agree that it comes from processing. Something like celiac or Crohn's may not have been in the 1800s because the food wasn't as processed.
yeah, I
Again,
mean,
it's how your body reacts to it too.
well,
But
you remember how you were discussing yesterday about how, with like we have the antibodies now to fight certain infections, like even a simple cut that you might not survive back like 300 years ago. You know how you're mentioning how a lot of that immunity is transferred from the parents to the child, and then so on and so on. Just with getting the shots when you're a kid. Um, do you think that could be the same as the celiac or the Crohn's disease that you might not have seen 100 years ago or 200 years ago because of the food processing?
I'm not going to say that immunity and food processing, but I will say that food allergies and inflammation or reaction could have a family line.
Right.
Something like me with diabetes follows a family line, and different other diseases follow a family line.
Right.
So, food allergies and food reactions could follow a family line, or skip a generation and go from a grandparent to a grandchild and miss the mother or father.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of why when we were kind of also discussing yesterday. I guess for anybody that's watching, we were trying to do a podcast yesterday and technical issues, so we kind of redid it today. But we were kind of discussing yesterday about fitness and diabetes and things like that, and that's kind of why I like to stay active. Um, I did a podcast a couple days ago with my fitness coach. I'm still waiting to upload it. But with that, I was gonna mention to him like that's why I stay active is because diabetes runs in my family, and it's shown that genetics can skip or genetics, but like certain family diseases or family transmitted, but like family like inherited. Sorry, that's what I was trying to find the word. Inherited diseases tend to skip generations or skip the um, will skip like and give it pass on to the grandchild. So my grandpa Kelly, he had diabetes. I'm thinking that possibly my granny had diabetes, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I think maybe another person in my family had diabetes. Um, so, like I try to, and also like weight issues, um, heart disease, things like that really do run in my family. Heart issues for sure. So, I mean, you only can beat the, you can't stop something from happening. We all die one day. But I mean, I'd rather do it at 95 than 60. Um, so, I just try to take care of myself now. And I mean, of course, you get to that age where, you have kids and things happen. You're going to put on some weight possibly, like things happen and that's only natural. But, right now I have control and I have control over my body and I try to keep things as natural as I can. Um, so, I mean, for you, so do you use, because obviously you've told me that you have diabetes before. So do you use exercise to help control the diabetes or how does that work?
I do. I like to, like I said in my last podcast, I'll exercise with cardio a little bit, not as a focus, more weights. I do throw cardio in there more some days than others, but approximately 5 days a week or so, with 2 days off with rest and stretching. And in that time, I do feel my sugars are better. You do have a better control, and therefore, you're doing less damage to your body. But getting back again, comparing health to the 1800s, you look at even, like you said previous, they were moving all the time for work and didn't have machines. And
Mm-hmm.
same in the 1960s, let's even go back 60 years, that the stress was a little less, the lifestyle was a little easier, right? Just little things like that. And now we're more rushed, we're more stressed, the food has changed, family dynamics have changed, and the world has changed. So
Mm-hmm.
we see now people with weight issues, people with stress issues, but again, stress and weight are totally tied together. People with more heart issues and stress and heart issues are tied together. So where is the middle ground here, right? Uh, it's all in the food and diet, and I think that totally helps people.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, whoops. I mean, like for sure, like I think, yeah, when you look at going back in history, when people had to pretty much do everything by hand, yeah, I mean, you didn't even have to work out. I mean, just having that lifestyle as a farmer, and I mean, I'm not talking about a farmer today. I'm talking about a farmer like even back in the 40s, you did a lot of things by hand. But even by then, that's when things started to become more modern. Like you had like the old tractors and machinery and stuff. But maybe like let's say we're going back to even the 1800s. I mean, you had a horse that helped you plow the fields, but you still had to push. And I mean, just work like that in general. I don't think you would have to go to the gym because I mean, you look at your pushing, so you're possibly using your arms, your shoulder, your delts, your your lats, I mean, your legs. Like you get a full body workout just doing yard work, and then the cardio as well. So I mean, I think that, when it comes to being active, that's why gyms are so popular these days, because a lot of our world is now very remote and mobile, and we're not doing as much work ourselves as we did in the past. So I think people are trying to find more ways to stay active. And I mean, gym is the way to go now. And that's why I think it's such a popular thing. It's such a popular trend. Now, I'm not going to get into like society and society pressure on women and men as well. But yeah, and that's a factor too. I mean, you get society telling you like, well, if you want to be pretty or you want to look this way, um, that's what society's telling you. You have to work out. You got to stay fit, which is not the case. Um, but anyway, like that's a totally whole subject there that I could get into. But
I
yeah,
see
like
it.
with
I'm sorry. I see it too as even from the 60s to now, the 40s to now, even going back to the 1800s, that's really far. But machines in the 40s and the 50s have helped you. So you couldn't plow as much, speaking to a farmer previous. Now, with machines and computer guided tractors, the cost is more, but I can plow a lot more,
hmm
right? So with machines too, our jobs have changed. We're more sitting, or we're, like you said, we're more mobile all the time. We're moving, sitting, this. And what we've learned is this causes your body to gain fat because you're not moving,
hmm
correct?
correcto
So
mundo.
you gain fat in the visceral area. The visceral area is just around your abdomen, belly button area. And a lot of people carry heavy fat there. And I've read or I've seen in videos that a lot of these people could get sick more often. I'm not saying with disease, but maybe more colds, more flus, things like that. Fat contains toxins. So you're just keeping toxins in your body. So the people with less fat, and I'm no doctor, but the percentage of them getting more sick could be less. I'm not saying they won't get sick, but the percentage is lower because they're carrying less toxins in their body.
Right. Now, I'm trying to figure out a way to say this. Now, like with so you're saying that like it's okay, so what about like the fat? Okay, so I mean we all have to have fat on us. So I mean, does that really? Because I mean, like, but the thing is, and you got to realize, like, there's so many people that are so overweight, and I mean, even like people that are like extremely overweight, and it seems like they're nothing's, they never seem to get sick. So is it so much that, or could it be also just genetics in general?
Oh,
Because
genetics is totally a factor as well. We found too in readings and in school, environment plays a key part. So where you live and what's around you, something like I'm going to use Sarnia as an example, Chemical Valley, the air in Sarnia quality is less. Then we go to
well,
our south in Mexico City. Mexico City, they're in kind of a low point. So all the air or, heavy air goes into Mexico City. So environment plays a key factor as well.
I mean, I'm just gonna stop you there. I don't know, but I can't totally agree with you on the whole Sarnia thing. My girlfriend kind of fact checked me on that. She's like, I know a lot of people are saying that like Sarnia is really bad for chemicals, but they found and they did a study that actually there's nothing that the chemicals are doing are harming people. And I mean, I don't see that part of that. I don't know if I would 100% agree with it, but I mean, if I don't know, like she lives in that area, or she did live in that area, so, I mean, she probably knows more than I would. But I think anything that goes in the air that comes from a chemical plant probably is not going to be the best. Um,
I can change a little
yeah.
bit of my view and say it was worse at one time and could be better now because of the standards that we hold these companies accountable
What,
for.
what about, like, what do you think about the industrial age in the 1800s? I mean, because that was huge. I mean, do you think it's actually cleaner now, or was it actually cleaner back then?
Well, that's a good question. That takes a lot of thought. I'm
Yeah,
kind of drawn in the middle. Okay, just like we said before, the way that things were back then. Again, there was less people at that point.
right.
There was no cars on the road to fuel exhaust, no big machines on the road, just kind of factories pumping out. Did they run on coal? Did they run on steam? I'm
I
not
think
sure, but
I'm pretty
that's
sure it was coal.
okay.
Yeah,
So that's a dirty resource,
that
right?
is very dirty.
And then we come to today and look at the millions of cars on the road and the buses, taxis, tractors, heavy machinery. Is it cleaner today? We're just holding companies at a higher standard for keeping the world clean, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think today might actually be worse because, well, one, there's more of a population, and yeah, like you said, there's a lot more cars. There's a lot more gas exhaust going in out in the environment. I mean, I don't know if you ever saw the pictures. It was a picture of the river, or like the river, or the whatever you call it in Venice, in Italy, and
Like the
they took a
canals.
picture. Yeah, the canals. They took a
Okay.
picture of it before the coronavirus, before the lockdown, and then about 3 weeks after of everyone kind of being quarantined, you could see how much cleaner the water was. And I was like, wow, that just goes to show you that it's not just, well, no, Venice is just smelly, and well, it is, from what I've heard, but it's not, oh, it's just smelly and that's how it is. Well, no, it probably was clean at one time, and because of our population and how our world works, yeah, we have been destroying the planet. I know people criticize and say climate change isn't real. 100% it is. Um, Now, when we talk back in the day, I mean, go back far back as we can remember. I mean, or as sorry, not sorry, as far back as we can go, even during the Roman times. I don't know if water would have been that dirty because yes, they didn't have the same kind of idea of like clean water, like having the filtration systems. But I mean, the Romans and Greeks, like they were pretty intelligent. Like they had some sense of how can we get clean water. I think, but probably still wasn't as good as it was today. But that being said, they didn't. The population of the world wasn't very big, so how much were we really polluting the earth at that time? So maybe in terms of that, I mean, maybe the the pollution wasn't very bad. So the water might not have been that bad to drink. Um, I mean, we still filter our water better than they did back then, obviously. But because of the pollution, maybe the pollution wasn't as bad. So maybe the water wasn't as bad. There wasn't as much disease in that sense. I think that's an interesting point to think about. It's like one of those things I find you could think about on a Friday night. You're bored and you're sitting there thinking, is it, you got to wonder, right? Like,
So I like where you went there. So the word that I like is like consideration. So there's so
right.
many people in the world, we have to be considerate of others. So we're
Hmm.
in this pandemic now, and people are buying gloves, wearing them to the grocery stores or stores. And I'm not sure if you're allowed to do that anymore, but we just take those gloves off and throw them on the ground. Boy,
Well, people who
that's a
have no
lot of litter,
respect.
right?
Yeah.
And be considerate of that. And I like what you said about water. Back in the day, in the Roman era, the water, I agree with you, was probably clean, very fresh, because it
Yep.
came from a source. And there was no pollution because there was not a lot of garbage. I'm sure there was garbage in their time, but not to the extent that we have.
Oh
And what
yeah.
we do with it, they didn't have electronics. All of our electronics contain heavy metals. When we throw away batteries in the garbage and we throw away, our laptop, our old phones and iPads, and if that goes in the ground and that gets to the water table, that could totally cause harm to people if that gets into a drinking water.
Hmm.
So look at the problem now, what we have, right?
Oh, 100%.
So I totally agree with you that it was cleaner back then. The filtering system is better now, but it's at what cost too, right?
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thought to think of anyway. One thing I was going to bring up about the medieval era, I know yesterday we kind of touched upon dragons and fantasy stuff like that. Still, I still believe that it came from some kind of source. I mean, we talked about how things, when myths and creatures and things like that always come from some kind of truth, I think. Um, Now, I mean, mind you, okay, so you've obviously seen Lord of the Rings and all that
Yep,
kind of stuff.
yep,
And
yep.
have you ever watched Game of Thrones?
No, that's one I haven't gotten into. I
Okay.
think I've heard a lot about it. I just, A, I didn't get the channel, and B, I'd have to start it and watch it all the way through. I'm that type of person. And at
Yeah.
this point now, it just seems like a lot.
Yeah, and I want to watch it, but for some reason I don't have that kick to want to go see it. Um, but anyway, so I know enough of Game of Thrones. Like I have the idea of like what the show's kind of all about and how it like the characters and the different tribes of like certain people and creatures and like there's like the White Walkers. Like everyone knows about that stuff. It's so popular. I mean, they just ended the show. But I mean, you look at Lord of the Rings and you look at a show like Game of Thrones. Obviously, Game of Thrones would be a little bit more realistic when it comes to like medieval kind of the whole medieval story, like the medieval kind of theme.
Correct.
Now with the Lord of the Rings and movies and TV shows like that, when we talk about the medieval times, we were talking about dragons, how myths kind of come from somewhere. I don't believe obviously orcs were a thing back then. Obviously, that's all made up from um, the the uh,
Fantasy.
the author from the Lord of the Rings books and the Hobbit. Obviously, that stuff is all fantasy. And then in terms of like the dragon and all that kind of stuff. I mean, all that stuff is all fantasy. But I mean, I like how how much of the Lord of the Rings, how much of that stuff was actually possible back then that just didn't get documented. Um, like I mean, like I know it sounds kind of nuts. I know I sound kind of crazy, but I am kind of keeping open minded here because how much of things that happen in Lord of the Rings could have possibly happened? Like, how do we not know that? Um, when we hear about different rulers like King Henry VIII, I think that was his name, the one that killed like all of his wives. Um, how do we look at that and interpret that as how do we not know that he could have been like I think when you have people that make up fantasy stories like Lord of the Rings and they use the whole evil of Sauron and he was this evil person, do you think they could have got that idea from real life uh, characters like King Henry VIII, who was ruthless, or Attila the Hun? Like people like that. That kind of they take people and then they use them as a reference, I guess. That makes
Uh,
any sense?
yeah, no,
I
no,
might be getting too deep in
I,
this
I get
thought
what you're
process,
saying.
but
There's two things on that I'd like to cover.
okay.
First of all, stories or myths, fantasy, like we said before, are usually based on something true,
Yeah.
right? The one would be, and this is a big thing, Dracula. Dracula is actually based on Vlad the Impaler,
Who was I
who
think he
was a
was a
real
real
person.
person. Okay, he was a
Yeah,
real
so
person.
he was a real person, and throughout the years, Bram Stoker made a story, and it was Dracula, and he Transylvania and the castle, and the
Hmm.
castle's actually there, and a lot of the story was true in that time, just changed to now. The other part I'd like to cover is English. English itself has changed in these thousands of years. They
Hmm.
could have written a story in the 1800s or 1600s, and it was changed in the different types of English or language that they had, and then we finally got a story. So how much is that story is actually true or changed? You know, some words didn't match up with others. So we could be getting a completely different story, a half true story, or a quarter true story. But we have to guide the stories now to the audience that we want to buy our product, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, let's see. I mean, when you're talking about Vlad the Impaler, obviously, okay, if he was a real guy, and apparently he drank blood or something. So
Well,
I
I
mean,
think he killed his enemies, he beheaded them, and he put their head on stakes. So
okay,
that tells an example of people trying to attack him. Look what I did to the previous people who tried to attack me. So it's a good intimidation factor, right?
okay, and then they just took, and then there might have been some ideas like the rumors might have got spread around like, hey, Vlad the Impaler, yeah, and then he drinks the blood too. He must be some kind of creature, and then they take that myth and really maybe the guy was just freaking nuts and
Right.
was some psychopath and just obviously like back then, yeah, I mean it was completely normal to leave warnings for other enemies, like saying, well, you attack me or you try to kill me or we beat you, this is what's going to happen. Like, yeah, that I think putting heads on spikes, that's a little extreme, but I'm sure that was completely normal. That was completely normal for armies to do back then. Or they would they use certain tactics to kill the enemies in very horrendous, very horrible ways, and that put fear into the enemy, and they're like, oh, fuck off, I ain't fighting, like I don't have to fight you, I'll join you, I'll join your kingdom. Um, so yeah, I mean, when we kind of discuss, I mean, there's always some kind of truth that comes from a certain myth, like Dracula. Obviously, vampires aren't real, but at least we can say that okay, well, but Vlad the Impaler was real. Is it possible that he drank blood because he was just freaking nuts? That's a possibility. And then they just use that whole, well, he drank blood, so he must have been some kind of vampire. I mean, you can watch so many videos on YouTube about possibility that vampires did exist at one time, but like I said, all those stories either are just made up stories, just that sounded so believable that they got shared so much, and then could have been believable. But yeah, I think obviously vampires aren't real. It's not possible. Science proves that you can't live forever. Um, but yeah, it's
We can get into that about living forever, but that's going to be a whole podcast on
yeah,
its own, right? Um, we've learned a lot from the past. We've learned a lot that changed the future, or a lot of battle techniques, from the past into the future. And
mm-hmm.
what I'd like to mention now that we are recording on June 6th, this is the 76th anniversary of D-Day.
It
Speaking
sure
of
is.
a big battle technique, the largest land invasion of the history of the world.
Yes, it
This took
was.
over 1 year to plan, 156,000 soldiers, and our hearts go out to those who have died or family members in the service. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Um, it, it's unfortunate. It's scary how devastating that day was. And we were discussing about how it was a successful mission, but I like to use the term unsuccessful, successful mission because yes, they got the job done, but at what cost? And not just the cost of the Americans, British, Canadians, but the Germans too. I mean, the Germans just got obliterated, and they were ready, but they weren't. They weren't ready, but they were. I mean, they knew they were coming, but they just didn't expect that kind of scale. They thought this was gonna be Dieppe all over again. So, um, and I mean, the whole war was just it was insane. Like millions and millions of people died. Like I mean, you look at, and I'm not just talking about all the Jews that were killed, but we're talking them like the civilians, and it wasn't even so much soldiers directly killing citizens. It was just, oh, blow a hole through that house because we need to we need to get to the Americans before they get into this town. We're gonna blow a hole in someone's house. Well, someone's living there. What the hell are you doing, man? Like, what the fuck? Like, you can't just blow a hole in someone's house. Uh, but yeah, and just things like that. I mean, that's an air raiding, like the bombings in London, the bombings in Dresden, I think it was in Germany. Yeah, it just the human, like the casualties of the World War II was just insane. And I guess and war just continues. So I just really hope that we can learn something. And yeah, I mean, like, we were discussing yesterday about how realistic the movies have become. We talked about 1917 and how I thought the movie was pretty realistic. I know you haven't seen it. Um, and just about how, like, movies like Saving Private Ryan, like that first 20, 30 minutes in the movie, it was just, yes, sir. Just how the movie was so realistic, at least that first 30 minutes. And then the rest was more like a more fictional story, per se, of a nonfiction story or a nonfiction event. Um, yeah, so it's, yeah, movies have just become so much more realistic. Unlike watching TV shows like Combat, as we discussed yesterday, how that was more of a adventure, because I don't think that people wanted to see how realistic it was back then. And also too, I mean, that was a different era, and that was the kind of that was the attitude of movies back then. There was always the hero of the day. Even with horror movies, you had and I really enjoy the old horror movies like Creature of the Black Lagoon. There's the creature, there's the pretty lady, there's the man to save the day, to kill the creature, and then save the lady at the end of the day. That was the basic storyline of movies back then.
Getting back to the war,
Yeah.
even coming home, you needed hope. You needed hope that you could go ahead with your life, because when you came home to a totally changed world, that's why they put on shows like Combat, that not only told the people at home kind of a story of what the soldiers went through, kind of how they did it. Today we look at it and say, oh, it's kind of unrealistic, but that's what they could do in the 50s and 60s. And it was a very popular TV show. Another
Right.
TV show that we mentioned yesterday was Band of Brothers. And this took a squadron of men and brought them from the start of the war all the way to the end. We also discussed that more towards the end of the war, when they brought in new soldiers, the people in the company of Brotherhood, they didn't accept these new people into their company because they knew the war either A, was almost over, or they could have died that day. So they kind of stuck with their group.
Right.
Now, if you can see behind me, I have two shadow boxes. One here, this is my great uncle, and one here is my grandpa. My grandpa served in the Ordnance Corps, and that had to do with the moving of goods, the servicing of weapons and vehicles, and the maintenance and repair of products, right up until 1944. My uncle, or great uncle, he was a navigation pilot in a plane. And he went up in a plane. This plane got shot down in a city. They ended up helping the people, right, as a resistance. They helped the soldiers. They got back up, and he got up in a plane. And unfortunately, that was his last plane ride, and he died in the war. So I've had service men in my family. Have you had any in yours?
Yeah, I'll talk about that. But what did he just get shot down after, or what happened? He said it
As
was his
far as
last
I
flight.
know, they got in the plane again, and either it was foggy and they ran into something, or they did get shot down. So that
Okay.
was kind of an unfortunate thing. They got shot down and came back again.
Okay.
So I never met him, nor did I meet my grandpa, but I heard very good stories about both of them.
Okay. Okay. So you're asking me about my family. So Like my grandfather, my grandpa Kirkland, he was in the Navy during World War II, but he was young. He actually, so he was pretty young when he went in. So he got in at 44. So towards the, getting closer towards the end of the war, where Germany was losing a lot of their Navy air. Like, I mean, they were just, everything was so crazy by 1944. Like they weren't losing, but they were at that turning point where, okay, like shit, now you got the Americans, Canadians, British, and Russians all on your front. Like you got to do something. But anyway, so my grandfather, he was 17, and you weren't obviously legal enough to join. So what happened was, this is a crazy story. Okay, so my grandfather, he was 17, and he wanted to join the Navy. So what he did was, they would ask for your birth certificate. So it said that he was 17. So he spit on his card, rubbed it in the dirt, and then just said, yeah, and then claimed that he was 17 and a half. So they're like, okay. So they let him in. He was 17 and a half. By the time he did the training and everything and went over, he would be 18. And that's kind of how they bypassed everything. So that's a kind of funny little story there. And it's pretty clever. But anyway, he did that so he could go in and serve. And he went in and he was on a frigate, which is like a cargo, I think. It's like kind of like a cargo boat. And he was like a gunner. So he'd be sitting in the gun, shooting any planes that would come in the sky. He didn't really talk a whole lot about it, which is something that is a typical thing of a veteran. He just talked about more like the training and going into the Atlantic and yeah, just more like when he was going over, getting ready to go ship out. Talked uh, about other things. But he didn't really talk about. He talked about, yeah, there was days where it'd be boring, and you're sitting out there and you're just sailing. Now I don't know. He didn't tell me the story, but it's kind of a funny story. I don't know if it was him or it was my great uncle. Cause also my great uncle was in World War II, but I'll get to that in a second. His oldest brother. Um, yeah, so apparently the story I was told, I think it was my grandpa Kirkland or it was my great uncle Stewart, but I think it was my grandpa Kirkland. So I don't know if it was after the war ended or it was during, like before, like before they shipped out or whatever. I think it was after the war. So he wanted to go and celebrate, and this is the story I was told. So he wanted to go and celebrate, and he went to some bar, and back in that day, he grew up on a farm. He wasn't a city guy. So he's going in and he's looking around. He's had a couple drinks with a couple of his buddies and he's looking around like, where are all the ladies? And then so it took him a while to figure out what was going on. And all he sees is just men all over. And he's starting to see some guys like touching. He's not clicking on what's going on. And then he finally finds out his buddy's like, oh, yeah, I think this is like a gay bar or something. He's like, what the fuck? Okay, well, let's get out of here, boys, because they're out there trying to catch some ladies, right? I think,
Yeah, yeah.
so like it took them a while to figure out, oh, this is gay bar. But back then, that was very, like, that was shunned upon. Like, you would not be gay back then, or
Right.
you would not be gay, or whatever. Like, that was totally not okay, or not accepted. Sorry. So that's a little story about my grandfather there. That's one that I did hear. So I think it was my grandfather or my great uncle. Now the one about my great uncle, he was in the war for 6 years. He was in there from 39 to 45. I mean, that's a long ass time.
Oh, definitely.
And I don't think he was in Dieppe by any means, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about where he was fighting. I don't know a whole lot of stories. He didn't talk about it. Like, he was very damaged from the war, like a lot more damage. Like, he had a lot of problems. Um, I think a lot of problems with drinking, which a lot of men did. My grandfather, not so much, but I think for him, he definitely had some issues there. I think, as far as have been told, I might be wrong. But I know for sure he didn't really talk a whole lot about it. But it might have been him, the story that I was told, or it was my grandmother's father. I can't remember which one. I get the stories mixed up. I'm going to go with my great uncle because I think that might have been Or no, sorry, it was my grandma's father. So I'll get to that story also. So the one about my granduncle, I looked up a story about him and how he was a sergeant, and their CO got killed. So he was basically putting these guys through. He was basically taking command of this whole company, um, and he was helping out until whoever in charge could take over. And because of all of his heroic acts and how long he was in the war, he actually got a medal from Montgomery. And there's a picture. I'll send it to you after this. And actual picture of him getting like the pretty much the almost the highest medal you can get. It'd be like getting like the Medal of Honor.
Correct. Yeah.
And you didn't. Not too many people got that medal. Maybe 3 or 4 people out of all these soldiers. So actually, his medals are now donated to the armories in Chatham.
Hey,
Uh,
cool.
yeah, the armory's out on Bloomfield.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty cool. And then my grandmother's my grandma Kelly's or my grandma Jan's father, he was in the American Army. She's American, or she grew up in Chicago. So he was in the American Army, and I think this was the story that I was told by my dad. I think my dad told me the story. So he actually got captured in the war. So what happened was he was fighting in the I think it was Operation Market Garden. So like in the fall, and I think it was Operation Market Garden or it was Battle of the Bulge.
Yep. Yep.
He's not too sure, but it was around that time, and they were in a town, and a bunch of these guys were getting killed, and so they were getting overrun, and it was the SS. So like you're fighting the Waffen SS, like they were ruthless. And so what happened was like a grenade or something went off, and he got shrapnel in his leg. So he laid there and played dead, like he was dead. And some guys that were like trying to get away, who were like wounded, the Waffen SS just shot him. Just shot him. They didn't take any prisoners. So he just lay there. Oh, well, okay. So he just played dead, acted like he was dead, and they walked by. And then there was another group of just right like a normal Wehrmacht. I can't say the name, but just in regular Germans, a group of German soldiers were walking by, and he got up and put up his hands and took a little white flag and surrendered to them, and they took him and they patched him up and brought him to POW camp, and that was that. That was the one story I heard, and then the other story was I think it was him. Uh, so it was a rainy night, and it was a rainy night, and they were out in the dark, and there was lightning and everything going on, and they had to stay guard because they're German. They don't know if the Germans were around. They didn't know, but they stopped by. I think it was like a church or something, and there was a bunch of statues and things like that. And at night I think he was standing guard, and he was kind of just kind of dozing off. And then every time the lightning would go up, it looked like there was a soldier standing in the field. So he's, oh shit! So he takes his rifle and takes a couple shots, and nothing happens. And the lightning goes up again. He sees the guy again. He's like, "What the hell is this guy not dying?" And he takes a couple more shots. The other guys start shooting, and like, how are these guys not dying? And then they assume like, okay, well, what's going on? Well, then the morning came, and they found out they were just shooting at statues. They were shooting at statues. So, uh, yeah, they were shooting at just statues, and the statues were all like they were all wrecked, and they were all like shot up, and they were all crumbling from all the shots, and yeah, I remember hearing that story. But yeah, it's that whole D-Day invasion. I mean, that it was insane, and it being the anniversary, it's good that we show our respect to the veterans, the remaining veterans, or the fallen veterans and fallen soldiers that protected our country. Um,
I have
so
I have two more points here, and we can move the subject. One
yeah,
point is at the end of the war, when it ended, there was a soldier, I do believe, in Japan that was still fighting, He didn't believe the war was over. I don't know if you've ever heard this story, and this is a new story for the YouTubers out there if you want to look this up. There was a guy, and he didn't believe the war was over. He still fought. He stayed in the jungle for over 30 years. So he finally surrendered, or they had to force somebody in the forest to get him to come out and get him to trust people to come out, right? He came out in 1974.
Oh my gosh.
Wow, right? And I just read an article the other day, and this relates to the movie Monuments Men. I don't know if you've ever heard of that movie.
Yeah, I think that was one where they try to keep Nazis from stealing art or destroying it.
Correct. So the Nazis always wanted their own art and their own culture, correct?
Yeah.
So they wanted to take down everything. Michelangelo, Picasso stole all this art, stole all this gold, statues, and they hid it.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know where it was hidden. It could be hidden all over Europe and Germany and that. And somebody found a diary recently released to the public, I do believe. And this diary was from one of the top Nazi officials in line with Hitler. And it was a location of this gold. This gold was in a castle, 17th century castle in Poland, in a well, 200 feet below ground.
Oh, wow.
So you could look for your lifetime and not find anything. And now we kind of know what it is. And this value of treasure is estimated at over 200 million euros.
Oh my gosh.
Now convert that to Canadian, you're looking at over maybe $500,000.
I still,
I'm sorry.
So I wouldn't.
500 million. I'm going to
Okay,
correct
500
myself.
million.
Sorry.
Okay, that's better.
But that's better, yes. Now, could you just imagine?
I couldn't imagine. I mean,
that is something.
That's enough to ruin your life 10 times.
Right? Absolute power absolutely corrupts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, getting to something we both like, and there was a big fight a few weeks ago and one coming up soon in the world of MMA.
Yes.
Now, I just have to look at my notes here. I'm not 100%, but John Jones, he's big in the news. What are your thoughts? Have you heard what's going on?
Okay. So the story that I'm kind of getting at, so with John Jones, I think pretty much what was going on was he wanted to fight Francis Ngannou, like go up to heavyweight and fight the guy. So, so pretty much what happened was he wanted an X amount of money to fight. Now, obviously, if you are, unless you're living under a rock, you would understand that most sports aren't running, and UFC is not having the crowd, so they don't have that kind of revenue coming in. So pretty much what happened was he asked for X amount of money, and Dana White went on video and said, "No, I'm not doing that." And then John Jones is like, "Well, no, I never asked for that." That's kind of the story that's going on, and he's like, "No, I don't think that's gonna happen. Like, I'm not paying you." I think the idea was 30 million to fight Francis Ngannou. I don't think that's really a super fight unless like John Jones was the champ, and maybe Francis Ngannou was the champ, or whatever would have happened. But it wasn't really a super fight. He was just going up to heavyweight. Like, I mean, it would have been an awesome fight, no doubt, but it wasn't a super fight. So he wanted all this money. Dana White said no, and he got all upset, got all butthurt over it, and pretty much said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna relinquish my belt and release me from my UFC contract." Now, a lot of people just think that's just a stunt to kind of get what he wants. I don't think that's his best interest, because John Jones, as people know, he's had a history of him doing things. I personally think that he is a fake person. And I'm just looking at that as a fan perspective. Like, I don't know, like that's how I think people. Sorry, that's not even so much my perception. Like, sorry, I don't so much think that, but that's more how I feel other people would see it, as him being as a fake fighter. Um, and the reason why I think reason why I think other people would feel that he's a fake person is just, he talks all this like, he's made so many bad decisions, and I don't think it's entirely all his fault. I think he's surrounded himself with people that aren't taking care of him. He was a young champion, and when you get all that stuff, it really gets to your head. And I think that's kind of something that Conor McGregor has had to learn to get through. A little bit of a different situation where Conor McGregor's more just made a crap load of money, and money can destroy you. But with John Jones, he's proven over and over that he just keeps screwing up, and he's done all these things. And I just think that I think he's a bit, or I keep saying me. No, I'm trying to not make this bias like, hey, I hate on John Jones. He's an incredible athlete, but he's had a history, and I think that's why I can see how people think he's fake. And yeah, like I just think that if he were to relinquish his belt and the UFC got rid of him, yeah, that'd be a loss for them. But that being said, maybe that's what he needs to do is go to a different organization and realize like no one's gonna pay you that kind of money. Um, so
Fake to me
it's
is such a strong word,
what's
but
that?
fake to me is such a strong word, but there's a big but there. I
Right.
see what you're trying to say. On
Yeah.
one end, he has his actions, which may not be the best, and what he's done, maybe what he's said, things like that. On the other end, he kind of continues to win. He's ranked pretty high. He was once ranked, if not still, best pound per pound, and little things like that. He's fought Daniel Cormier, but asking 20 to 30 million dollars for one fight, that's kind of a lot.
Yeah,
That's
and
a
that
lot to expect. And
yeah,
as well, I agree with you to go up in weight to fight Francis Ngannou. He's going to heavyweight. He's never been to heavyweight. Is that correct?
yeah, and I don't know if that's why he wants such a big payday because he's worried that he's gonna get knocked out.
He's
Yeah, I don't
rated
know.
an underdog. If he would fight Francis Ngannou, he's rated an underdog. And when was the last time that you've ever seen John Jones rated an underdog?
Exactly, and I think honestly, if he goes up to heavyweight, he's gonna have some trouble up there.
Right.
If he fought like guys like Stipe Miocic, even Daniel Cormier at heavyweight, I think he would have an issue. And
And
I really do think that John Jones will have a problem if he goes up to or heavyweight because yeah, the guys are slower there, the guys gas out more, but I'm telling you, like the power's different, and the guys are much bigger, so he's not having a 80 something reach on smaller guys and like heavyweight. He's fighting legit guys. And I think in the last couple of fights, we've seen John Jones having trouble with some of these guys fighting him. Like he's not whooping ass like he used to. And I think
right.
part of that is guys are he's finally fighting guys that like, and I'm not trying to dismiss anybody, but I've seen some title defenses where he's fought Lyoto Machida. The guy was getting old. He fought Chael Sonnen. Same thing. Guy was getting a little bit older. He's fought a lot of these older guys, or he's fought in a bunch of people who I just don't think are in the same skill set. Like, I mean, say what you will about him and Gustafsson, that first fight. Yeah, I think John Jones just wasn't prepared, and I don't think that was a bad excuse. No, he really just wasn't prepared, and that did show. But props to Gustafsson, I think he beat him. And John Jones, the thing is, there's a lot of criticism against him in that last fight where, and I'm trying to not say bias because I'm not a big fan of John Jones, and that's okay. Um, but like with his last fight, he totally lost. He lost against Reyes. I mean, Reyes, I was like, oh, geez, this guy's gonna be a powerhouse. He's gonna gas out, and he starts slowing down. I'm like, okay, bud, good luck. And I thought John Jones was just gonna smoke him, and no, I think he hung in there. He won 3 out of 5 rounds, no doubt, and the guy still won, and it blows my mind. And I'm gonna get to the next part after this about with the judging and everything. He lost against the Reyes fight. I think he lost when he fought uh Thiago Santos, Maheta Santos, and yeah, I think he lost that fight too. Now, mind you, if Thiago Santos had not blown his ACL, like I can only imagine how much more that guy would have got messed up uh, because Santos was just lining them up. Like like the guy's powerful and his cardio stuck up and he was doing really really good. And I think he beat John Jones, but John Jones still won. It was insane. So yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts about John Jones?
I have my own opinions on the Reyes fight.
Sure.
A lot
Yeah.
of people are saying that Reyes won. Reyes won. You have to look at kind of the fine print and the fight rules for that fight.
Yeah.
It was a stand-up fight. If I recall, there was not a lot on the ground.
Yeah.
More stand-up, and yes, you did see kind of both of them gas out a little bit. But the fight always goes, just like a poker hand, goes to the champion, like
And
a
that's
championship advantage.
Yep.
And if you mess up one thing, you have to show that you can beat the champion. If it's just kind of stand up and nothing goes there, that's one thing. But if you're flipping the champion, getting a few more punches in, showing more technique, I'll give it to you. One more comment with John Jones is you can't, with Jones, like you said, in his fights now, these past fights, he's did some special moves, I'm going to call it. Spinning back fist and things like that, right? You
Yep.
can't pull that off in every fight because kind of people know what your moves are now,
Yeah.
right? And to come up with a new move in a high-ranked fight, you're taking a big risk.
Yeah.
Right? So that's
I
my
agree.
thoughts.
No, you know what? I mean, I gotta agree with you with the certain moves that he's done. I've seen a lot of things that he did with Gustafsson. The first fight with Gustafsson. I think he's done some things with Lyoto Machida. Uh, I don't know if he did with Daniel Cormier in the first fight. I'm trying to think some other fights that he's had.
He fought Rampage back in the day.
Yeah, but he's done some different kind of techniques, but you're not seeing him do it anymore because he's actually fighting guys with the same skill set. He's fighting guys who actually have something to bring to the table, who can give him a good fight. And I think he's realizing that, and he can't have that same movement and stuff. And I mean, mind you, he's in his 30s now. When he was whooping ass, he was in his 20s. Also, USADA wasn't in there. So I think John Jones has been cheating. I do believe that he had been using stuff, which other fighters have too. I'm not trying to single him out. Like, there's other guys have used PEDs and performance enhancing drugs, steroids. I believe it 100%. I mean, you look at like
Vitor Belfort.
Vitor Belfort, he was on TRT, no doubt. He was on TRT. He was taking anabolic steroids. He was taking stuff. I mean, you could look. I mean, don't get me wrong. The guy was getting older. No doubt that does happen. Your body starts to sag a bit in your body. But even at 40 years old, the guy shouldn't have looked the way he did. Like, maybe, okay, you're not going to be tip-top shape like you were in your 20s. I wouldn't expect that. That's just human anatomy. Your body does go through changes like that, but not the way his did. And as soon as Asada came in, he just went, and and then he retired, and I think he retired. I'm not sure if he's going to fight again in another organization, but I think he did retire for sure from the UFC. And as soon as he retired, he went for testosterone replacement therapy, and now he's all jacked again. So I'm like, yep, that's what happens. When USADA comes in, and you look at everyone's body size, and it's like, oh, okay, now people aren't as jacked as they were. So
If you look at Vitor Belfort and anybody watching this, and you're a fan of wrestling, Wednesday night AEW is a new show, and Vitor Belfort accompanied Mike Tyson to the ring, so they're all buddies now, right? Speaking of Mike Tyson, he was also accompanied by another fighter, Henry Cejudo.
Henry Cejudo.
Cejudo, thank you. It's so hard pronouncing everybody's name. So he just fought Dominic Cruz, and Dominic Cruz hasn't fought in 4 years. Did you
I know
watch that, or what are your thoughts?
that was a joke. I mean, no doubt, I like Dominic Cruz. He was one hell of a fighter one time. He's getting old too, but it's not like he's Dominic Cruz. It's not like he's 40 either. He
Right.
has fight in him. Um, Henry Cejudo, you got to say right now, he's one hell of a he became one hell of a fighter. There's no doubting his skills. However, I'm just gonna backtrack his last few fights, and then you can tell me what you think of that. So he fought when he went for the title again. He fought Demetrius Johnson, which I don't think he won the fight, but he won it because they knew they were making a trade with DJ and the guy from One Championship, the guy
Ben
that
Askren?
the Masvidal knocked out in like 5 seconds.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Some joke
so
guy, right?
yeah, some curly-headed guy.
Yeah.
Ben Askren, sorry.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
And I think that was the worst trade you ever could make because now Ben Askren's done in the UFC, and you just lost a great fighter like Demetrius Johnson. And but anyway, so he beat Demetrius Johnson, which I think he lost that fight. Then he goes in and he fights TJ Dillashaw. I mean, props to him for fighting him.
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, he fought a depleted TJ Dillashaw, who, even though he got caught for EPO, still, I mean, he still shouldn't have fought at that weight. And I think that was dangerous, cutting that so much weight, and that's why he got starched the way he did.
And TJ Dillashaw got caught. He's out for a year, and he hangs out a lot with Dan Blitzerian. So is he at a loss? I don't think so, right?
Yeah, and that's just it, right? And yeah, and then he fought him. I mean, he beat him fair and square. I think it was still kind of a early stoppage, maybe. Like, should have let the guy actually try to, like, I don't know what the guy. I find what the guy does is he clips someone, and he's just so fast he keeps hitting you, and then it's like you're trying to get up or you're trying to do something, and you're not knocked out. You can fight back, but it makes it look like you're not fighting back, and I think that's his strategy to win a fight. But anyway, so that fight happened. Okay, he won, but he beat a depleted guy who shouldn't have cut to that weight. And then he fought Marlon Moraes for the open bantamweight fight. And that fight, he fought a guy that wasn't ready for the title. But props to him, he came back in the fight and won. But he fought a guy that wasn't ready, and I just don't think that was. He should have fought. They should have given him someone a little bit of more of a test. And then he got the title. And then after what? Who else did he fight after that? Oh, I think maybe Marlon Moraes. And then he called out like a bunch of. He called out Cody Garbrandt that's been knocked out three times in his last 3 fights.
Yeah.
Who is actually fighting tonight.
He is, yeah.
He called out Uriah Faber, an old guy. Called out Dominic Cruz, another semi-old guy. Like, so it's like, I'm not saying, it's not a terrible thing, but when if you are trying to call out all these old guys, it's like, come on, man. Actually fight someone that you're gonna have more of a test with.
Right.
And so he called out those guys. I think Dominic Cruz was the next guy after Marlon Moraes. I'm pretty sure. I don't think he fought anybody else.
So if you look at the history of him, he was, I do believe, wrestler in high school, went to a wrestler in college, all collegiate. He was an Olympic wrestler, and then he kind of turned to MMA, which is kind of the best sort of fighter. You're very well-rounded, right?
Yeah.
With that wrestling background and Olympic wrestling. Man, you're pretty good right there, right? And Absolutely. You come in, now you're holding 2 titles, right? Title in 2 divisions. And he calls out a guy that hasn't fought in 4 years.
I know.
Yeah, Dominic Cruz is good, but yeah, sure, you're a little rusty. And what are you going to do as a promo, Dominic Cruz? Hey, yeah, I haven't fought in 4 years. The last guy you fought, he's retired too. What do you got? So to me, they should have let Dominic Cruz fight some guy, ranked number 8 or 10 to see if he could still do it, and then give him this fight. That was kind of my thoughts, right?
Well, and that's it. I mean, if you know, we could talk all day about Henry Cejudo, that guy. But going back to a couple of the last events, because they had to cram a lot of events just because of the COVID-19 and because they got Jacksonville as a place that they could do the event. So they're like, well, we're not going to put all this work into one event in Jacksonville, and then we can't have any other places. We can't, because normally UFC has an event almost every other weekend. In different places, but at the time they didn't really have anything opened up. So obviously they're gonna have the Fight Island soon. But in Jacksonville, so they had 3 events in like a week and a half. And the first one was at 249, and that main event was just insane. I was rooting for Tony Ferguson. I
Oh,
wanted
me
him to
too.
win.
Yep, me too.
It was insane how he got dismantled. But it's crazy. I don't think he got beat up bad, but it wasn't like beat up and put against the fence. He just kept coming. Like he just can take a beating. Like I don't know how any human being can take that kind of damage to the body. Like it was just you just
He
look and just think like
he cut
how.
a lot of weight too for that fight, and they said that was like a decision maker.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people think too is that he he cut weight twice and that's what they think really made a difference. But even at that, I don't think so. I think he prepared so long for Khabib as a wrestler and he didn't have enough time to prepare uh for um
Justin
for
Gaethje.
Justin Gaethje. And Justin Gaethje just fought a good fight. He had a damn good fight, the best performance that he's ever put on. And I'm not a big fan of Justin Gaethje, but after that fight, showed a lot of respect for the guy. And props. He's gonna fight Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I think he's gonna have a good chance against him. But
Yeah,
Khabib is he's a different animal. And yeah, and then there was other really good fights. Like I saw there was a knockout. It was I think Calvin Qatar versus it's Dominic's teammate Steven not Steven Thompson, Steven can't remember his name. I have the picture of it in my head of him, but Steven okay, I'm just gonna call him
yeah,
Steve.
whichever.
Anyway,
Yeah,
the guy got knocked out by an elbow. It was insane. I was like, oh my, like that's one of the best knockouts I like seeing is when people get knocked out from an elbow. Because elbows in MMA, if you don't know, it's more pain and cutting the person open than so much knocking out. Like, I mean, you get an elbow in the jaw, it's nighty night for you. I mean, I don't care who you are. You get a shin or you get an elbow to that spot on the jaw, you're gone. Like I don't care who you are. Most people cannot take a hit like that. It's something to do. It just shuts your body off for a second. And but like I said, I mean, normally elbows are more they just cut you like especially because where you're getting hit in the face, you're more likely to get hit on top of the eyes. So you get cut up here, you get cut up in the eyebrows, and blood gets in your eyes. It's more of an annoyance and it's pain than anything.
yep.
Um, but yeah, that was a really cool knockout. A couple other really really good fights, and then there was the one event. It was Anthony Smith and Glover Teixeira. I thought Glover Teixeira was gonna get knocked out or was gonna get beat, but the other guy, his corner just yelled at him the whole time, like, "Let's go, fight, fight!" Like just constant on his ass. And your job is to listen to your coaches. So he threw everything but the kitchen sink, and he gassed out, and then the Glover Teixeira just put a doctor beating on him, and and it was and one part of the fight you can hear him like Glover is on his back and he's hitting him and he's like sorry Anthony, part of the job. He's like what? It's part of the job. I'm sorry. He's like yeah, it is what it is, man. And then he's like pulling out his teeth. He got some of his teeth out. He's pulling out his teeth. He's giving like he's laying on his back. He's like pulling his teeth, giving it to the ref. He's like, here, and the ref's like, I got you, buddy. He's like taking his teeth, putting in his pocket.
and
It's
and
like,
Glover
oh my
Glover
god.
Teixeira is over 40 years old, right?
Yeah, I think he's 40 actually, 40
Yeah,
on the dot.
good for
Um,
him, right?
oh, I know. and he looked like the old Glover Teixeira. It was amazing. But anyway, the guy, you can hear the guy in his corner saying to his team, he's like, "Oh god damn, my teeth are falling out." He's like, "That's all right, just keep hanging in." And it's like you're telling your teammates your teeth are falling out, and I think you lost a tooth or two. Uh, and I mean, not too many sports do you hear things like that. Like, my teeth are falling out. Like in hockey, you'll see fights and you'll see blood, but like even at that, you don't see that classic fights anymore. And then there was the event on the Saturday. It was Overeem and um, I can't think of his name. Walt Harris, and those guys fought, and I felt so bad for Walt Harris because I think they used some of it as a promo. So his daughter got killed by some guy.
Oh, yep, yep,
Oh, you heard about that?
yep, yep.
Yeah,
And they
and
used it as just an emotion thing to try and get him kind of pumped up and
yeah, and pretty much
excuse
like
me.
the countdown to the UFC event, they kind of use that as like the hype for the fight. Like they were counting on him to win. That's kind of like that redemption. Like they thought he would win and he would do some speech like, "This is for you, so and so." Like I think that's kind of what they were trying to orchestrate. But it didn't go his way. Like Overeem stuck in, he got clipped at the first round, and then second round he stuck in and he beat him, and he just tired the guy out and just kept hitting him and beat him in the second round. So there was that good event, and then
And
there was
Overeem has a lot of history too as being I don't want to say controversial fighter,
yeah,
right? He's had some controversy behind him, and he's an older fighter too.
he is, but
Another older fighter that I'd like to mention is he used to be one of my favorites, but he hasn't fought for a while. Anderson Silva. He's
oh
now
my gosh,
45 years old, and they want, or McGregor wants to fight him.
I think
So
that's ridiculous.
I think that's ridiculous too. I wanted to hear your thoughts of 45-year-old fighter. He would be the second oldest next to Randy Couture. Okay,
And
way back in the day, and he wants
yep,
to, or McGregor wants to fight Silva. Again, it would be a catchweight fight. McGregor is like has, the fire burning behind him. Anderson Silva hasn't fought for a year, and he's not the same spider he used to be, right?
no,
I
yeah,
wouldn't book it, but that's totally up to them.
well, I don't really understand how that fight's gonna really happen. Connor to have that kind of to fight at that kind of weight, I don't know, man. Like I don't like the fight. I don't like it. It's not because they're, I mean, two big names, but it's Anderson Silva at 45 years old, Conor McGregor, who's a lot smaller. I mean, Silva could fight at light heavyweight and middleweight, and Conor can fight at welterweight. So Conor would have to even go up more or have to fight at certain catchweight. And it's like I don't think so. I don't think that that's a fight that I would personally want to see. I mean, I would watch it if it's on TV. Like I can't prevent a fight from happening. But yeah, that's definitely a fight. I just don't. I don't wouldn't want to watch it. I think Conor needs to learn to fight regular fighters like anybody else, but it's Conor McGregor, so you know, I guess whatever. It is what it is.
I've got three fights here,
Okay.
and you pick one, the
Okay.
best one that you would book, and tell me who you would think would win.
Okay.
I have Khabib versus McGregor as number one. Everybody
Okay.
wanted to see that.
Okay.
John Jones versus Daniel Cormier. Okay, that would have been the other one. And the next one, we'll just throw this in there. McGregor versus Sylvia. Or Silva,
So,
sorry.
oh,
Yes.
Silva. Okay.
So we have Khabib McGregor, Jones versus DC, and McGregor versus Anderson Silva. Which one would you book, and who do you think would win?
Okay. Well, I will say right now, um, that I wouldn't want to see Khabib fight McGregor again, unless if like there was certainty that McGregor improved his ground game or whatever. So no, not no to that. And I would say no to McGregor and Silva. Obviously, I've already explained I don't think it's a good idea. So that leaves, yeah, Daniel Cormier and John Jones 3. I'd love to see that fight, but I would like to see that at heavyweight.
Yep.
And the reason why is because Daniel Cormier, honestly, I think fights a lot better at heavyweight. He's a lot more dangerous. And he's fought John Jones twice. What does he got to lose? What does he have to lose? Oh, he's beat me twice. Okay, well, I'll try a heavyweight. But it'd be interesting because now John Jones is just fighting a heavyweight. He's not cutting weight, but neither is Daniel Cormier, and that's what makes it really interesting. Is that okay? Now Daniel Cormier is not cutting weight, so Daniel Cormier is not going to be depleted. He's going to go in fresh, and Daniel Cormier is dangerous at heavyweight, I think. And it's not his first fight at heavyweight when he fought Stipe. He used to fight at heavyweight, and then I think he transitioned into light heavyweight.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm not sure if it's when he fought Dan Henderson, or I can't remember who it was that he fought at light heavyweight. But anyway, he fought, and then he transitioned to light heavyweight. So I think that would be a great fight. But I would not want to see it at light heavyweight. I would love to see it at heavyweight. I think Daniel Cormier actually might beat him at heavyweight. And I'm not joking. I know a lot of people don't like Daniel Cormier because the reality is, I don't know why. I think he's a great speaker. He's great as an analysis. He knows the game really well. I think he would be a better coach and a better fighter, to be really honest with you. But I mean, he's a great guy. He seems like a good person, but I think the problem is that a lot of people don't like him because he doesn't look like a champion. Even at light heavyweight, he's not in the best shape. He's he's not what people want to see as a champion. So I get that, and he has a bit of that like, I'm trying to correct everything with John Jones and whatnot, and he cried on video, and it just I don't know. I really don't have a problem with Daniel Cormier. I really like him, but I get it why people might not like him. But I don't think people don't like him in the sense of, oh, I hate this guy. I think people just aren't a fan of him because of the way he looks and everything. But there's a lot of other fighters that people just don't like in general. Like nobody likes Colby Covington. I've heard things like, well, he's not really like that. That's the like the stuff that he does with the cheap fucking suit and the mega hat that he throws on. Like Joe Rogan's talked about it, like that cheap suit he wears, the mega hat, like him wanting to put the belt on President Trump's desk. Like that's all. I believe that's all a stick. That's all part of his character. Because from what I've heard is he like in general, and he's just talking with people and stuff. He's the nicest guy ever. But when the camera was rolling, I think so apparently he was going to get released from the UFC after his last fight. I think for obvious reasons, just the things that he did outside the cage. So he basically shit talked his way to a title fight, and he got a title fight with Kamaru Usman. And honestly, that was probably one of the best title fights I've ever seen in my life. And props to both guys. I don't even like Kamaru Usman that much. I just don't like Kamaru Usman. He's just kind of. I do like him a lot more after that fight, but I'm not a big fan of him. I just don't really. He's just, I don't know. For me, I don't know. But that was one of the best title fights I've ever seen. And I mean, I've never seen too many title fights where the guys are both on their feet for 5 rounds, and when they're hitting each other, it's not a little tap. No, like almost every punch was a smack. Like every single freaking punch, you could hear it digging into the guy's face, and they just kept coming. And like that was a great fight.
You've heard it here, folks. Today we want you to book this. We want it in heavyweight, Jones versus DC. Book it, UFC. Here we go. You'll make some money. In the last couple minutes here, I'd just like to talk about the summer season, right? Okay. It's summer. It's coming up. Great weather, right? Yeah. And congrats to you. You recently bought a new car. How do you like it?
Yes, I did. Thank you. It was actually my dad's car. It's a 2012 Nissan Altima.
Fantastic.
And well, actually, I didn't buy it. It like he gave it. I meant when I said bought it, it's that word gets thrown around. It was actually handed down to me. But obviously, like I still have to pay my own insurance and things like that. Yeah. So anyway, so I got a new car, and it's nice. It's a lot nicer. Don't get me wrong. I like Hondas. Hondas are well made. The engines are well made. But the car was getting old, and it was time for a change, and I certainly upgraded. So it's my first time having a car with a screen in the car, so like a screen like with a backup camera and everything. So that was different. But I'm still getting. I think it's like when you buy a house or when you live on your own. Have you ever got that feeling of like, is this really mine? Am I really living on my own? And it takes a couple weeks to really adjust. That's kind of the process I'm getting into right now. Is is this really my car? Like, it doesn't feel like it's mine yet. That's kind of where I'm at right now. So yeah, that's kind of the process I'm at. My dad just bought a 2020 Toyota RX4, or I'm not sure what they're called. R I'm not sure what they're called. Ram 4 or
RAV4, Toyota
Rav
RAV4.
Rav 4.
Yeah.
That's what they're called. I'm not big on. I couldn't really remember the name now. I can.
So
Yeah.
now you said you
Well,
can't believe this car is yours, and now
yeah.
that it's yours, you have to do something to it,
Yes,
and
I
that
do.
requires washing it.
Yes.
So these next couple minutes, I'm just going to talk about steps.
Okay. You,
I'm a
the
big
floor is
fan of
yours,
this.
buddy.
I watch a lot of YouTube. I've got my fancy bucket here. Now, to wash a car, a
Yes.
lot of people talk about that, and you use different products. I like to use the same products throughout my car wash or detailing process.
Okay.
You can pick any companies from Meguiar's, Dr. Beasley's, Chemical Guys, Mother's, or everybody's kind of favorite Turtle Wax, right? Now, to wash your car, you start off with a 2 bucket method, and your one bucket just has water. Your other bucket has soap and water. So, with your mitt in the soap and water, and I'll show you here, I like to use Meguiar's Gold Glass Car Wash. That
That's
turns
good
out
stuff.
really nice. You dip your mitt in the bucket with the soap. You first get your car all wet and soap your car up. So now dunk your mitt in the second bucket with water. That takes all the dust and dirt and contaminants off instead of putting it again in your soap bucket, right? You don't want to
Right.
scratch your car. So after that, you can do one of two things. If your car is older, like mine, you see the paint is kind of blemishing. For guys, women may understand this better, but paint is like your face. It has pores. So you have to clean those pores just like you clean your face, right?
Absolutely.
The next step after the car wash would be the clay bar. The clay bar gets in the grit and the pores of the paint, kind of
Okay.
takes the dirt or sandiness out. If you feel it, it's kind of rough. This clay bar process takes that all off.
Yeah, so does it kind of I hope I'm just interrupting here. Um but so does that kind of give it that new car kind of look on the paint, or how did like what would be the result of that, of using
Uh,
that?
so I did it on my car twice already.
Okay.
You kind of see if you just kind of wash a car, it will have kind of a dull shine to it.
Okay.
Okay. So when you take this clay bar, you get the grit in the paint out. And with that, then you clean it up and you wipe it down. You put water on it again, and then you can apply the product, the next product that would give you that new car look. So it kind of cleans up the blemishes and just a little bit of your paint, the dullness there.
Okay.
And it makes it more smooth. So you can feel the car would feel kind of rough. And after this clay bar application, it'll feel more smooth.
Right.
So after that, once it's wet after clay bar, my new product is Meguiar's Hybrid Ceramic Wax. And it
Okay.
doesn't take a lot to apply. This would give you that new car shine. You know,
Okay.
this hybrid ceramic wax is different than other waxes because it helps with UV protection. That helps with keeping the shine of your paint. It helps repel dirt and dust. And I watched a video with that in the winter time. A gentleman pulled his car out, let snow get on it, and he just was able to push it off with his hand instead of really having to scrape and scrub it off, right?
Okay.
So that's the difference. And then the one last application, I use Rain-X spray on my windows.
Right
So
on, man. Me too.
instead of anything sticking to your windows, the rain just kind of beads off. Does it make
Yeah.
your gas mileage improve? Maybe a small amount, but not significantly. But I like to say that's the pride in your ride, right?
Right. I guess thanks for showing all that.
Hey, you're
I
welcome.
didn't know that I didn't know there were so many products like that. Um, but I think when it comes to your car, I do you have to put all that fancy stuff on it? Probably not. But do you need to clean it a couple times at least during the summer? 100%. Like your car is like your body. You need to make sure you're taking care of it because the less you take care of it, more problems come because of other problems that you're not addressing to. So cleaning your car, making sure it's clean, that goes a long way. I mean, it helps with the paint. Yeah, and I mean, who doesn't like to have a nice, sexy car down the road in the summer? I mean, come on, clean it
Right.
up, make it look nice. If you got a nice looking car, just makes it look even better. So, um, yeah, I mean,
I do agree with you. You don't need all these fancy products. If you wash your car here and there, that's great too, right? And it
yeah,
gets you out, and it's an experience, right?
mm-hmm,
So I feel like the car like represents you. You drive around in it. So if you just throw garbage in it and it's dirty and that versus something that's clean, there's a difference in uh, perception there too, right?
well, it tells a lot about your character, right?
Right.
Same as your house. You keep your house dirty, it tells a lot about who a person is. I mean, to extent, I mean, I think it's acceptable to, you know, you might have a bit of a, like my room's a little messy, but doesn't mean that I'm a messy person. It just haven't got to clean it. Well, that's
Right.
my excuse anyway.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
But yeah, man, we're kind of coming up on an hour 30 minutes here, so I just want to thank you for coming on here and joining because it's always a pleasure
Hey,
having you
thank
on
you.
here. So I'd
Thanks
love
for
to
the
have you on
invite.
again and get
Yeah,
into more stuff. Eh?
definitely. Sounds good to me. I always enjoy talking to you. I enjoy your podcast, and I wish you all the best in this situation we're in.
Thank you.
And to all the YouTubers out there, enjoy. Have a great day and enjoy the summer.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Yes, sir. Thank
All
you.
right.